So adding items underneath the water is a little tricky because there's a color cast and kind of a haze. So let's talk about how we can adjust for that in our composition. So let's go ahead and bring in the underside of our island. So we're going to go to File, Open, and we're going to use the mountain image. Get your V tool, move, and you can click, hold, and drag, or you can use the Control A, Control C, Control V. All right, so now that we've got this in here, it is facing the wrong direction. We want it to look like an iceberg underneath. So I'm going to hit Control T to rotate and resize it. I'm just going to kind of line it up here until that looks pretty good. All right, so now that I've got it where I want it, I've got too much of it. So of course we can just mask this out. I want it to conform to the side. So I'm going to click the side and I'm going to turn that into a selection. And then I'm going to mask that out by hitting the mask button in the layers palette. There we go. So now I don't have as much cleanup to do. If we hit Z to zoom in, I can see I have a little bit of cleanup to get rid of the old sky, and I've got to kind of make this blend here. We already have a mask though, but don't be afraid because you can just add to that mask the way that you've been adding to the mask by painting on it. So we're going to get B for brushy, and I am just going to come in here and delete the pieces that I don't want by painting over them with black. We don't want any of this here. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more, make my brush a little bit smaller. And luckily the rock is supposed to be a little bit rough, so it's okay if it's not perfect. There we go, and just mask out all of these sections that we don't want. It's just like erasing, only it's not permanent. Non-destructive editing. And why do we do this? Because we might need to come back and add parts of these back in, and if we erase them, those pixels are gone forever. So if we do it this way, we can always recover if we mess something up. And this side is way too, there we go. All right, so when I zoom back out, that doesn't look too bad. The only problem is it's bright orange underneath the water. So I need to add a tone to this image or this composition piece so that it blends with the color around it. Now we don't have an adjustment layer that can do that, but we do have a layer style. A layer style is a different type of algorithm that can blend with your layer. So we're going to go to layer and then layer style. If you're doing it from your layers palette, it is going to be the FX button right down here, and unfortunately it's dropping down below. So either way, we'll get you the same thing. So layer, layer style, and we are going to do one called color overlay. Now when you first use color overlay, it's a little shocking. What it does is it throws down an opaque color, whatever color is chosen, on anything that is not transparent. So it's basically going to cover the entire layer. Anything that is showing in that layer, it's just going to throw some paint on top of it. So that's a problem, but we're not going to leave it like this. First of all, we're going to pick a blue kind of tone, and we don't have to try to eyeball it over here. We can just hover over our image until we find a blue that we like here. Not quite sure why it's picking up black. Well, I'll do it this way. All right. So right now I've got the blue tint over it, but it's covering all the details. So if only I had a way to blend that blue into the colors underneath. Well, we do right here. where it says blend mode, we are going to switch that. Well, first we have to lock in our color. And when we start to flip through these, we can see, oh my goodness, look how cool that is. It's giving that, it's adding that blue to the colors underneath. So we can flip through these different items until we find one that looks really good and that blends that blue down into, there we go. So that's much better, but it doesn't match exactly. But because we're doing non-destructive editing, we can always go back and tweak that color. So we can maybe tweak down in here until we find one that's closer. There we go. Oops. Let's try that one more time here. There we go. There it is. So we have our iceberg ready to go, but it's very sharp. There's a lot of detail. It's almost too much detail. So what we can do is we can actually sandwich it between two layers. And we already have the perfect layer to sandwich it between. We're going to do our light ray layer. So I'm going to grab this light ray layer and I'm going to right click and duplicate it. And that's going to give me another version of that same layer. So if I grab my light ray layer and bring it right on top of my iceberg, now look at that beautiful, look how it just blends so beautifully, just beautifully. So the next thing I want to do is, because there's a light source coming from this top, there's going to be light here across the top and down the side of my cross section. So I'm just going to paint that in just like we did with our shadow across the bottom. I'm going to isolate that side first by clicking on the side and doing a new selection. We're going to paint this into a new layer. And I'm just going to get a big fuzzy brush, B for brushy. Use those square bracket keys. And I'm just going to, whoops, that's a very hard edge. We don't want that. Switch this over to a very fuzzy brush. There we go. Make it even bigger and fuzzier. And I'm just going to paint along the top and down the side. And yes, it is very harsh, but you know that we can back that off a little bit, either with our opacity or our blend modes. We do have the lighten and screen blend modes. I'm going to bring that down just a little bit more, so we just have a little bit of that light shining through. All right, so now let's add some wildlife.